For 700 years, two empires stood locked in an unrelenting struggle. Rome, the iron fist of the West. Persia, the eternal guardian of the East. Neither could destroy the other, yet neither would ever bow. This was not just a rivalry, it was history's longest duel for power, faith, and survival. Darkness gives way to dawn, and across the world's stage, two civilizations awaken, each destined for collision. To the west, an empire that rose from the ashes of kings to forge a republic of citizens, legions, and law. To the east, an ancient dynasty born of kingship and divine order, whose throne was said to rest upon the very mandate of heaven. In these distant lands, separated by deserts, mountains, and vast expanses of earth, two giants stir. Their footsteps would echo through centuries, their shadows would stretch across continents, and their names, Rome and Persia, would become etched into the bedrock of history itself. Rome began humbly. A cluster of villages on the banks of the Tiber, ruled by shepherds and farmers, hardened by struggle and shaped by necessity. Yet there was something within them, a restlessness, a hunger for order, power, and permanence. They built roads not merely of stone, but of ambition. They carved laws not merely of justice, but of dominance. Each victory over a rival tribe, each campaign in a foreign land, became a step toward empire. And from the smoky hills of Latium, Rome began its inexorable march toward immortality. Persia, by contrast, carried with it the wisdom of centuries. Its roots ran deep into the soil of ancient Mesopotamia and beyond, inheriting traditions older than Rome itself. Where Rome thrived on discipline and citizen duty, Persia thrived on the majesty of kingship. The great king, enthroned in palaces of marble and gold, ruling over peoples of many tongues, faiths, and customs. This was not a realm of city-states or fragile alliances. It was a world-spanning dominion, woven together with the threads of tolerance, trade, and awe. Its borders touched the edges of the known world, from the burning deserts of Arabia to the fertile plains of the Indian. These two civilizations, though far apart, were destined to notice one another. Their worlds were divided by vast frontiers, yet they were bound by geography itself. The lands between Armenia, Mesopotamia, Syria became the crucible where East would meet West, where ambition would meet endurance, and where the clash of empires would become inevitable. The rise of Rome was meteoric, almost unnatural in its speed. From republic to empire, it expanded across the Mediterranean like wildfire, absorbing cultures, crushing rivals and demanding loyalty from all who fell under its banner. Its legions were more than soldiers. They were a machine, precise and relentless, their discipline forged in steel and blood. Rome's vision was clear. There would be no equals, only subjects. Persia's rise, however, was enduring. Where Rome burned fast and bright, Persia smoldered with a steady, unyielding flame. Its dynasty shifted from the Achaemenids to the Parthians and later to the Sassanids, but the idea of Persia remained eternal. No matter the conqueror, no matter the war, the Persians would adapt, endure, and rise again. Their strength was not only in armies, but in culture, in faith, in the deep sense that theirs was a civilization chosen to stand as a guardian of the East. And so, as Rome's gaze turned ever eastward toward the wealth of Persia's lands, the stage was set. Not for a fleeting conflict, nor for a war of conquest that would end in finality, but for a rivalry unlike any other. A rivalry that would span 7 centuries, shape continents, and forge legacies that outlived the empires themselves. In their beginnings, we see the seeds of destiny. Rome, restless, ever-expanding, hungry for domination. Persia, enduring, majestic, ever-resilient, the immovable counterweight to Rome's ambition. Two superpowers born apart, yet bound by fate, destined to define the ancient world through their unending struggle. The frontiers where East meets West are unforgiving. Harsh deserts stretch endlessly, mountains rise like jagged fortresses, and rivers carve lifelines through the dust. Yet it was here, in these contested lands, that two empires collided. Rome and Persia, neither willing to surrender, neither able to destroy the other, would wage a conflict not measured in years or decades, but in centuries. The clash began as Rome's hunger grew insatiable. Fresh from conquering Carthage and subduing Greece, the empire looked eastward. its legions marching into lands once held by Alexander the Great. The lure was irresistible. Fertile Mesopotamia, glittering trade routes, cities steeped in wealth and legend. To claim these was to command the very crossroads of the ancient world. But Persia stood in the way. The Parthians, heirs of centuries of Persian tradition, met Rome's advances with a new kind of warfare, swift cavalry, deadly horse archers, and tactics that confounded even Rome's legendary discipline. At Carrhae in 53 BC, Rome suffered one of its most humiliating defeats. Its legions broken beneath a storm of arrows, standards captured and paraded in Persian triumph. For the first time, the empire learned that not all enemies could be crushed by brute force. Yet Rome was not a power to retreat into shade. It struck back campaign after campaign, pressing into Persia's borders, seizing cities, burning palaces, and dragging its rival into constant war. The struggle became cyclical, Rome advancing, Persia resisting, Rome retreating, only to return again. No single battle could decide it, no single treaty could end it. Instead, war became a rhythm echoing across generations. The Parthians eventually gave way to a new dynasty, the Sassanids. Fierce, ambitious, and unyielding, they revived the ancient pride of Persia. With kings who claimed divine right, they saw themselves as the protectors of the East against Roman arrogance. Under their banners, Persia pushed back with fury. Roman emperors fell in battle, legions were annihilated, and once mighty Rome trembled at the thought of Eastern defeat. And yet Persia too would feel the steel of Roman vengeance. Emperors like Trajan, Septimius Severus, and later Galerius carved their way deep into Persian lands, even capturing the grand city of Ctesiphon. For a fleeting moment, Rome seemed poised to break its rival. But Persia was not Carthage. It could not be erased, for its roots ran too deep, its spirit too resilient. Time and again, it rose from the ashes, restored its cities, rebuilt its armies, and returned to the fight. The clash was not merely of armies, but of visions. Rome, with its legions and laws, sought absolute dominion. Persia, with its kingship and ancient traditions, sought endurance, legitimacy, and divine order. Each saw itself as the rightful master of the world. Each painted the other as barbaric, arrogant, and dangerous. And in the lands between, countless peoples, Armenians, Syrians, Mesopotamians, were caught in the storm, their fates bound to the ebb and flow of imperial ambition. This rivalry was more than bloodshed, it was the forging of identity. Rome defined itself by its struggle against the East, while Persia defined itself by its defiance of the West. Together they shaped the very idea of empire, not as a fleeting dominion, but as a force eternal, tested not by conquest alone, but by the endurance of centuries of struggle. The clash of Rome and Persia was not a war that ended. It was a rivalry that lived, breathed, and endured across time. And though no final victor ever emerged, both had their greatness and their fragility in the shadow of one another. For most wars, there is an ending, a final battle, a decisive surrender, a moment when one banner is lowered and another raised. But between Rome and Persia, no such moment ever came. Instead, their conflict stretched across centuries like a pendulum, swinging back and forth, advance followed by retreat, victory followed by loss. It was not a war, but a cycle. Not an ending, but an unending tug-of-war. The contested ground lay in the borderlands Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Syria. These regions became the anvil on which empires struck their hammers time and again. For Rome, these lands were gateways to eastern riches. For Persia, they were shields, barriers that protected the heart of their empire. Neither side could afford to lose them, and so the struggle endured endlessly. Rome's legions, armored and disciplined, would push deep into Persian soil. Their banners carried proudly, their siege engines battering walls that had stood for centuries. Cities like Ctesiphon, the jewel of Persia, were captured and plundered more than once. Yet always as Rome claimed triumph, the sands shifted. Logistics faltered, rebellions flared, and Persia's armies regrouped. What Rome seized in glory, it often lost in exhaustion. Persia too struck back with vengeance. Swift cavalry raids tore into Roman provinces. Cities burned, and emperors themselves fell prey to Persian might. Valerian, ruler of Rome, was captured in battle. a humiliation no Roman emperor had ever suffered before. Bound in chains, paraded as a symbol of Persia's supremacy, he embodied the fragility of even the most powerful empire. Yet even then, Rome did not collapse. It endured, rebuilt, and returned to the fight, just as Persia had always done. This tug-of-war was not merely military, it was psychological. Neither Rome nor Persia could imagine a world without the other as rival. To conquer fully was impossible. To withdraw was unthinkable. So the struggle continued, locked in stalemate, each empire refusing to yield, each empire unwilling to admit defeat. Decades turned into centuries. Generations of soldiers bled for lands they would never see secured. Treaties were signed, only to be broken. Emperors and kings promised peace, yet their successors reached once more for the sword. To live on the border was to live in uncertainty, forever at the mercy of two titans locked in eternal struggle. Yet there was a strange balance in this rivalry. Neither empire ever destroyed the other, and in that balance the ancient world found stability. If one grew too strong, the other rose to meet it. If one faltered, the other advanced. It was as though history itself demanded equilibrium, as though the world could not bear for one to rule unchallenged. This endless tug-of-war defined both empires. Rome, forged in discipline and expansion, found in Persia its immovable wall. Persia, eternal and enduring, found in Rome its relentless challenger. Their rivalry became a crucible shaping strategies, politics and identity. It was war without end, but it was also history without precedent. And so the centuries passed. Neither Rome nor Persia claimed absolute victory. Neither banner flew unopposed. But in their struggle they carved a legacy, not of conquest alone, but of resistance, resilience, and the eternal human drive to endure against an equal. For 700 years they pulled at one another, never letting go, never giving in. And in that endless tug-of-war they became the very definition of empire itself. War defined their relationship, but war alone could not contain it. For even as Rome and Persia clashed with swords and fire, another exchange took place, quieter, slower, yet just as enduring. Beyond the battlefields, ideas, goods and beliefs crossed the frontiers, weaving together two civilizations locked in rivalry but bound by necessity. It was a paradox. The very empires that tried to destroy one another were also shaping each other in ways neither could prevent. The arteries of this exchange were the great trade routes, the Silk Road, the caravan trails, the merchant ships that carried treasures across deserts and seas. From Persia flowed silk, spices, jewels and perfumes, goods so coveted in Rome that they became symbols of wealth and decadence. Senators wrapped themselves in Persian fabrics, generals adorned their triumphs with Eastern luxuries, and the markets of Rome filled with the fragrance of lands far beyond the horizon. But commerce was only the beginning. Alongside goods came knowledge. Persian science, mathematics and philosophy traveled westward, mingling with Roman thought and Greek tradition. In return, Roman engineering, architecture and concepts of law left their imprint in the East. Even in enmity, the frontiers became meeting grounds for the exchange of human genius. Religion, too, crossed the divide. The cult of Mithras, born in Persia, spread through Rome's legions, finding worshippers among soldiers stationed from Britain to the Danube. In shadowed temples beneath Roman cities, men bowed to a god born of Persia, carrying with them rituals and symbols older than their empire. And in time, as Christianity rose within Rome, it too seeped eastward, challenging Persia's ancient faith of Zoroastrianism and sparking new battles not only of armies but of belief. Diplomacy, though fragile, also played its part. When swords rested, envoys travelled. Gifts were exchanged, horses, gold, exotic animals, tokens not of friendship, but of recognition. For despite their hatred, Rome and Persia understood one another. They were mirrors, two superpowers unmatched, whose very survival demanded acknowledgement of the other's existence. Their treaties were often temporary, their promises brittle, but the act of negotiation itself left marks on language, culture, and tradition. The borderlands caught between these giants became the crucibles of fusion. In Armenia, Syria, and Mesopotamia, Roman forts stood alongside Persian palaces. Greek words mingled with Persian speech, and local peoples absorbed and reshaped the influences of both. These regions suffered the heaviest under war, yet they also became the bridges that carried culture across the divide. Even art bore the fingerprints of this exchange. Roman mosaics depict Eastern hunts and Persian garments. Persian reliefs portray victories over enemies dressed like Romans. The styles blended, sometimes subtly, sometimes boldly, until the lines between conqueror and rival blurred. The clash of empires had produced not only blood and ruin, but beauty. It is easy to think of rivalry only in terms of destruction, to imagine two powers, not internal hatred. Yet history reveals a deeper truth. Conflict does not halt the movement of ideas, it accelerates it. Soldiers marched with steel, but also with stories. Merchants traveled with goods, but also with customs. Priests spread faith, but also adapted it, reshaping it for new lands. Rome and Persia, despite themselves, were not just adversaries, they were collaborators in the silent forging of a shared legacy. And so, amid centuries of war, another story unfolded, a story of influence, of blending, of exchange. Long after the banners of Rome and Persia fell, their ideas lived on in the languages we speak, the religions we follow, the trade we value, and the art we create. Their rivalry carved scars into history, yes, but it also planted seeds that would grow into the civilizations that followed. The sun does not rise forever. Empires, no matter how vast, no matter how mighty, are bound to fall. And so it was with Rome and Persia. For 7 centuries they clashed, endured, and defined one another, until at last both were overtaken, not by each other, but by forces neither could withstand. In the West, Rome crumbled. Internal corruption, civil wars, barbarian invasions, these storms tore at its foundations until the empire that had once ruled the known world fractured into pieces. Its legions vanished, its emperors silenced, its grandeur reduced to memory and ruin. In the East, Persia too faltered. The proud Sassanid dynasty, heirs to centuries of defiance, faced a new and relentless foe, the armies of Islam. With a speed neither Rome nor Persia had ever known, these conquerors swept across their lands, toppling dynasties, seizing capitals, and reshaping the ancient world. And yet though Rome and Persia both fell, their rivalry did not vanish. Its legacy endured, in borders and faiths, in the very notion of what it meant to rule. The Eastern Roman Empire, known to history as Byzantium, carried the struggle against Persia until the very end, its armies clashing with Sassanid kings in wars so devastating that both empires stood weakened, ripe for conquest by others. That final war, fought in the early 7th century, drained them of their lifeblood and marked the twilight of their glory. But their story is not merely one of collapse, it is one of creation. The rivalry between Rome and Persia forged the idea of balance of power. For centuries, neither side could destroy the other, and so the world existed in tension, a delicate equilibrium that held civilizations in place. This concept, the recognition of rivals as necessary counterweights, would echo through history, shaping medieval kingdoms, modern states, and even the geopolitics of our own age. Their legacy also lived in culture. Rome's vision of law, government and discipline blended with Persia's traditions of kingship, tolerance, and endurance. The result was a fusion that influenced empires yet to come, the Islamic caliphates, the Ottoman sultans, the European monarchies. Every ruler sought to govern vast, diverse lands drew, knowingly or not, from the lessons carved in blood between Rome and Persia. Faith, too, bore their mark. Zoroastrianism's cosmic struggle between light and darkness influenced the way Christianity and later Islam conceived of good and evil. Christianity itself, nurtured within Rome but tested against Persian resistance, became the cornerstone of Europe. Meanwhile, Persian traditions of spirituality and wisdom traveled further than any cavalry charge, echoing in philosophies and rituals long after the empire itself was gone. Even the land remembers. The ruins of forts, the broken walls of cities, the silent stones of battlefields all bear witness to centuries of conflict. In Armenia, in Mesopotamia, in Syria, the scars remain. Yet so too does the blending of culture, the fusion of art, the mingling of traditions born of two giants who could never defeat one another, but who could never let the other go. In the end, Rome and Persia remind us of the paradox of power. They fought endlessly, consumed countless lives, and left behind rivers of blood. Yet through their rivalry, they also preserved balance, transmitted knowledge, and shaped the world that followed. They are a testament to the truth that empires do not only rise and fall. They endure in influence, in memory, and in the echoes they leave behind. And so, when we speak of Rome and Persia, we do not speak of victory or defeat. We speak of endurance. We speak of rivalry. We speak of two civilizations that, for 700 years, held each other in check, and in doing so, forged the very foundations of history itself. 7 centuries. That is the span of the great rivalry. From the deserts of Mesopotamia to the marble halls of Rome, from the palaces of Ctesiphon to the battle-scarred plains of Armenia, Rome and Persia fought not merely for land, but for identity, for the right to shape the ancient world. And though neither triumphed in the end, their struggle left an imprint that still reverberates through the corridors of time. Their wars carved borders, their beliefs shaped religions, their cultures mingled and endured. In their rivalry, we glimpse the eternal truth of history, that power is fleeting, but legacy is everlasting. Rome and Persia may have fallen, but the world they created through conflict and exchange still lives on in our laws, our faiths, our cities, and our very idea of empire. And so, as we walk through the ruins of Rome or gaze upon the relics of Persia, we are not merely looking at stones. We are standing in the shadows of giants who fought, endured, and in their rivalry helped give birth to the world we know today. If this story has moved you, if it has stirred your imagination and revealed the echoes of the past that still shape our present, then let this not be the end. Continue the journey, seek the stories hidden in history's dust. And most of all, share this tale so that the rivalry of Rome and Persia, the longest duel of empires, is never forgotten.